On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Brendan Grove. He is CTO and co-founder at PrizeOut. We're going to be talking about finding unique skill sets, and we're going to get into talking about Brendan's background and a little bit about his journey and how a unique background actually leads you to finding unique insights, and finding the skill sets you need aren't as easy as it looks, because you have to look at the sum of the whole sometimes, and you really have to know the core skill you need and not get distracted with some of the other things that you might. Brendan, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we start, tell us what PrizeOut does.
Yeah, so we provide payout and loyalty solutions across a few different spaces. So all catered around the digital gift card. So gaming payouts and distributions, and then as well on the payment method for credit unions, as well as reward solutions for credit unions.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. So this episode, we're going to talk about finding unique skill sets. And I mentioned we're going to talk a little bit about your background, and obviously you have a little bit of a different background. You have a unique journey. So maybe you could start off telling us a little bit about your background to kind of give some context to the conversation.
Yeah, I think my path to where I am today is certainly not traditional. So went to undergrad as a mechanical engineer, but did minors in computer science and business strategy, which led me to a master's in mechanical. I ended up actually going to DraftKings and started on the analytics team, doing a mix of analytics and product, before joining the data science team, which was a productionalized algorithms, so software engineering mixed with algorithms and kind of product there into PrizeOut. So I think from a, what do I do perspective, people would ask me, and I think I find that I just like to build things, right? So that's probably the common thread. Mechanical engineering, you love to bring a product to life, bring someone's vision to life. And I think that kind of extended its way to DraftKings and ultimately to PrizeOut, where it's all about, how do I take this idea that someone has and put it in production in whatever form.
Very cool. It's interesting. I had interviewed somebody who has a different background, different journey as an engineering leader. And we spoke about how that background shaped the way they viewed their leadership style, their skills. I guess when you kind of have that background, it's a little bit different, right? Has your own unique path to it. When you are looking at problems, when you're looking at how to drive solutions, does that give you a different lens to look at? Does it give you a slightly different angle to look at some problems potentially?
Yeah, I think it's probably twofold. One, you have to know that you're not the expert. So you have to be curious and humble and willing to learn, right? Because as you enter these different spaces, even if you think of PrizeOut being in gaming payouts and credit card payments and credit union payments, credit union rewards, like I'm just not the expert. I don't have 15 years of experience in one particular thing. So you have to kind of know that you know nothing, therefore you know something. But I also think that helps me in the sense that I've seen a lot of different things. So from a pattern recognition standpoint, you can start to recognize themes, or something that looks totally unrelated in two different areas actually is more related than you think. So by having that experience and constantly learning, I kind of, one, have to stay humble. Two, sometimes can draw connections between two things that otherwise you might not see.
You mentioned obviously surrounding yourself with people. I'm assuming that implies delegation. As a CTO, co-founder, very interesting business model, and obviously you've worked with some good companies as well. When you're looking at your role and having a non-traditional background and you're delegating, talk to us a little bit about that balance of that delegation, that input of information in, and then at some point you use your lens of seeing the world to make a decision to take action. Talk to us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I think you're not going to get it right 100% of the time. So, if you hamstring decision making because you must understand, you're just going to end up blocking really smart people. On the flip side, I find that finding opinionated, smart people, and that kind of hold one common theme, which is we want to make PrizeOut work, we want to make PrizeOut better. I get a lot of opinions, I get a lot of thoughts, and ultimately iron sharpens iron. So I think that they end up working a lot of those things out. And then you just watch for the output. So like, I'm not going to be the greatest front end engineer ever, But if I notice we're always going back to the same piece of code, or new people are always getting blocked by something, you can start to draw inferences. Maybe something's wrong, right? So let's start to push on it. Doesn't mean I have to understand it. Doesn't mean I need to be the best. It means I need to be the best at finding people to solve this problem. And I think that that's kind of how I think of the role, and doesn't mean that I delegate and walk away. I don't, but it does mean that I need to trust decision making by people other than myself.
Absolutely. And you'd mentioned this, I think references the sum of the whole is better than the parts. When you're looking at hiring people, and obviously in technology right now, a lot of the roles that everyone's trying to hire for, it's highly competitive, even right now, even though the market might seem slow, those core skill sets are super still in demand. Talk to us a little bit about, somebody who has a different journey to a certain point potentially starts looking to hire with a different lens than if you were just straight CS and that was a path you started and that's kind of the world you knew because that's the lens you understood. I guess when you're looking to hire, what do you look for? Or do you look for the hard skills? Do you look for some intangibles? Is there a combination? What is it typically you look for when you're looking to hire someone?
Probably a combination. I think, you know, a few things there. One is A players like to work with A players. I think Steve Jobs talks about how they police themselves a little bit. Um, I think that the difference between a good engineer and a great engineer is just giving a shit a little bit. Like there's lots of ways to get to the right answer. There's a lot of different pieces of technology that like are types of technology that can achieve the same outcome. It's, are you going to take it? Are you going to own it? Are you going to iterate on it? And are you going to make it better? Are you going to seek feedback? So I think those are probably more important than can you write the best, sort algorithm, in an interview. I just don't think it's that important. I also find that can you learn, right? The times are changing. They change fast. Even before the AI boom, like there's always new technology. So can you learn it? Can you understand it? Can you apply it? I think is more important than do you know it today. So that's kind of like the things we're looking for. And yeah, you need to know something, right? I'm not going to hire a great, front end engineer that doesn't know CSS. Like, what good does that do anybody, right? Our data engineer has to understand data lakes and ETL processes and like Snowflake. There's some amount of baseline expertise that you need, but I don't think that's always the most important, but it certainly is important.
Absolutely. And I do see sometimes hiring managers sit and wait to find, let's say there's the 9 out of 10 items on the checklist. They will just wait. And that's one strategy, right? So that works for them. I think sometimes from what I'm hearing, you might not need to wait for all 9 to be checked off. If the core is there, if you understand that this person has the aptitude to learn, you certainly can give them opportunity. I guess when you are looking at somebody who's maybe, out of the 10 ideal skills you're looking for, they have half, but they have the right aptitude. When you hire that person and you need to give them a little bit of time to ramp up, that does put a little pressure on your team. How do you balance that? How do you balance, letting somebody ramp up in those weaker areas while they have strengths, really maybe core strengths in other areas so that they can, bring those other skills to the table?
Yeah, I think as a startup, we're, I guess, both fortunate and unfortunate in the sense that you don't have a lot of hires and you can't be wrong very often, right? If you think of a bigger company, we have 200 engineers, we're going to hire 10, 2 will be rock stars, we'll fire 3, the others will find their place. And you can kind of be a little bit more, less picky, I guess is what I'd say. You could just, they're close enough. We'll kind of see how it shakes itself out. I think the way that we try to counteract that, and the same thing with ramp up, is hire very senior or hire pretty junior. I think when you hire junior, you're looking for ability to learn, curiosity, hustle, horsepower, right? Are they going to come in? And then you also, what you're giving them is you're giving them a lot of space to grow, right? And a lot of really smart people to learn from and grow with. So you can find the best of the best. On the other side, you hire people that are really ready for that next step of ownership and they're excited about it, right? They're excited about owning it. They're excited about the autonomy. They're excited about the pressure, really. And so when you pair those two types of people together, the ramp up is almost exciting, right? Here's a junior person that's gonna ramp quick and take the reins. Like you're almost okay with the time. You're excited about the teaching, and I find that you can. It's multiplication, right? It's like force multiplier. Is if an hour gives us 40 hours of great work, then you want to invest those hours along the way. It's kind of who do you have, what do you need, how do you fit this puzzle together, and do it in a way that doesn't, create massive bloat on any team.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. I guess from your perspective, do you feel your background having excelled in certain areas outside of what you went to school for, and obviously you're co-founder, CTO now, does that give you a certain amount of empathy when you look at candidates that are maybe don't fit the ideal, path or ideal mold? Does that come into play, or do you try to keep your personal journey outside of your decision making?
Um, I mean, I think it's hard not to, right? Even if you try to stay, as unbiased as possible in many ways. I had a senior engineer once ask me how I even picked this pretty junior person who ended up being one of our like MVPs early days. Um, he's like, if I looked at his resume, I would have just passed on it like right away. Um, and what's funny about it is there's a moment in the interview where, the technical part didn't go great, just from a lack of experience. But there was a question that involved rapid learning, explaining your thought process, ability to communicate, ability to collaborate, that he just blew us out of the water.
Hmm.
Like one of the best I've ever seen. And that was the moment when I was like, we have to hire him, right? Like he's a must have, even though he's raw. And he went on to be one of our top engineers. He learned everything from everybody. He was a sponge, right? Quickly, he worked hard. He collaborated with everybody. He was the go-to person, even as one of our most junior people, which obviously changed very quickly. So I think, like, yeah, do I look at him and say there's some of myself there? Maybe. Or maybe it's also I just know that if you give people an opportunity that want to learn, that are curious, like they will succeed. And so maybe it's just because I have the confidence that they can do it because I did it. So I don't maybe mix of both. Some bias, definitely.
Honestly, I love it. I'm a software engineer. I own a recruiting company now, so I get to see this unique dual sides of this perspective. And I do run into a lot of hiring managers that are, they have a checklist. You can tell, like they want to see these things because they need that confidence that the hard skills are there that they can test for. Because what you've observed, maybe with your backgrounds come into play, is there are those intangibles that are risky, right? And if you can't evaluate those, and in this case of this employee that you guys hired showed and demonstrated, something that's not easily testable. You can't put them through a homework exercise or a, coding exercise and see the answer. Because obviously you mentioned they did it do as well as, maybe you'd hope. So I think it's super awesome because I feel like there are a lot of candidates, a lot of people for jobs that fall into that bucket, right? And I know, obviously the show wasn't meant to talk about those people, but I think kind of to fit your background, I think that is pretty cool that you do see that opportunity, you give that person that opportunity. Because I see a lot of the opposite, and I do actually sometimes advocate for the person that's like, listen, the CS degree isn't there, but these other companies had to have seen something. Like, why is that such a hard requirement when we want to talk about, hiring different types of minds in this industry? We got to then kind of think there's other ways to get there. So I love your story. I think it's fantastic.
I also think we think about what are we trying to do here? Like we're trying to build a company, right? Like what does that mean? It means sell your product, make consumers love it. Nobody cares about the tech. Like we do. I do. I love writing clean code. I love seeing like a beautifully architected system. Like I do. It really does make me happy when you like get to write it or you go back or you see someone else's code and you're like, oh, that is beautiful. It has no bearing on the success of the company usually, except for, ability to recruit, ability to grow, ability to scale, right? Like, broken foundations will fall apart. But like we joke internally, Craigslist is one of the most successful companies of all time. Designers should puke over that, right? So, no, it's almost a mark of a successful company that engineers bitch about tech debt because that means you made it, right? Because you've made it long enough to have that problem. So just, keeping both thoughts in your head at once is important. You have to both simultaneously push towards great engineering practices, and this other side, like, make the company work. And I think sometimes when you have people that aren't always the truest of engineers, not for everybody, you want both. Like, you want that friction, you want that's wrong, right? With like, I'm getting this out. And if you do that well, like, we found magic happens.
I thought that's fantastic because I love the view, and I know we were going to talk about tech that it wasn't on the list of stuff we want to chat about, but out of curiosity, you kind of mentioned tech debt, and obviously a lot of engineers like writing optimal code. I mean, they strive for it. They want to write it efficient. They want to write it so that it stands up, it holds up. And then there's a different school that I'm seeing emerge and talking to leaders that maybe code is disposable. Maybe we don't need to go back and address it because the decisions made in point in time, all those variables have shifted. So to go back and re-examine an issue of what code this looks like 3, 4, or 5 years later is kind of unfair because it's not like it's static. When you look at code, do you see it as tech debt as something that you have to pay back? Is it a case of, you're here to build a company. Customers are not looking under the hood. They want to make sure the functionality is there, delivered optimally. Is there a balance of how you view that?
Yeah, probably twofold answer. So one CTO gave me advice once, and he had built the company. They sold it. They had, X engineers than we have, especially at the time. Is he said, he likes to think about it as if you go to the kitchen to cook on their dishes in the sink, do the dishes, right? Like, don't be like, well, I'm only here to cook my meal. I don't care if the kitchen's a mess, right? Like, clean up a little after yourself and clean up before you start. And there's things that you wouldn't even know need to be put away because nobody's ever cooking there before. That's okay. And on the flip side, I'd say that tech debt is harming your ability to launch, your ability to move fast, your ability to make small changes risk-free. Then it does matter, right? If it impacts both your ability to code and the customer's ability to use the product, that's bad. So, one of the markers that we use is you should be able to make simple changes without being scared. And I know we talk about, not to get into more philosophical conversation, you talk about testing or unit testing, like, yes, super, super, super important. But if you can't make small changes without making, introducing bugs that only unit tests are going to solve, like, the code is flawed. It just is, right? Like, you should be able to make small changes. You should not be scared. And it's not a testing problem, right? It's a code problem. So I think sometimes, like, we, as engineers, we kind of blame other things versus just like taking ownership and taking responsibility and just making it simpler. Not everything needs to get, more complex, even though entropy always is kind of leading in that direction.
Love it. Brendan, I was going to say thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. I love the thoughts and insights. You have a different perspective, and I appreciate that. If someone's going to want to connect with you to ask a follow-up of something you spoke about, what's a good way of getting in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not always great at answering everything. I'm on LinkedIn, or feel free to email me at brendan@prizeout.com, and I'll reach back out. Love to talk shop. Love to talk tech, and even tell me why I'm wrong or how I can get better, right? Always looking to learn, always looking to improve.
Awesome, man. Thank you for your time again. I really do appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I love this episode because talking to somebody who has a different background and has achieved success, I think it's a great example for a lot of people out there that want to follow a path that maybe wasn't something they had thought about. So I think Brendan gave us some great insights into his journey, how he hires, what he looks for, how he actually identifies some of those core skills that are really the intangibles. And we talked a little bit about tech debt. Didn't think we would, but we did, and it was great. So share this episode with somebody else who's going to find it of interest. I would appreciate that. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.